Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Klauser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with author and speaker Ken Miller. Ken, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it, the conversation.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it as well. I think you got a great story. I think the listeners are going to get a lot out of this. But before we get started, just, introduce yourself in your own words. Who is Ken today?
Well, today, Ken is a kind and gentle man, 62-year-old black male. I live in Bellingham, Washington, and I'm sure we'll go into some of it, but there's a long road and journey to get to where I am today. But I am a kind and gentle man. That's how I identify.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, have you always been a kind and gentle man?
Not at all. As a part of my story, I'm a three-time convicted felon. I've had violence on my record. I still have it on my record as far as I know. It hasn't gone anywhere, but I'm not that person today. My story is very simply I had a substance misuse disorder. I was a drug addict. Let's keep it real. I was a drug addict. And due to my drug addiction and the pursuit of more drugs on the streets, I engaged in behavior that was inimical to society, to others, and to myself. That's a real short version of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, talk a little bit about, when did your addiction start? Because, you were an Ivy League graduate
Mhm.
and at one point end up homeless and then convicted and, you know, have felon on your record at this point. But what I love about, where this conversation is going to go is it doesn't end there.
No,
It doesn't end with felon on the record. But, how early were you battling the addiction?
right. So let's start at the beginning if it's all right.
Absolutely.
I'm 62 years old, born in 1962, and my mother was a white teenage runaway who then met my father, who was a drug addict, not a drug addict, he was a drug dealer and pimp. That's what he did in New York. And she got pregnant by him and at birth gave me up for adoption. 1962, I was a mixed child. My father was African American and my mother was white Irish. And I did 6 years of foster homes. I knew I was not wanted. I knew I did not have a mother. And I knew in the best I could perceive is that I was thrown away. I was adopted by Irene and Sam Miller, and I grew up with a father that was an alcoholic who was violent. Wonderful adoptive mother named Irene. At age 12, I moved to Alaska, so I grew up in Alaska. I was precocious as a child. I was what you would call a National Merit Scholar. In high school, I was accepted to Harvard. I chose to go to Dartmouth College, got my Ivy League degree. Unfortunately, I graduated with a degree in fraternity with a minor in drinking. And then I went out into the world, went to my first treatment center, my first of 14 treatment centers, and was sober for 2 years, went into the corporate world, did very well. And then approximately 1987, 88, I ended up homeless on the streets with an addiction to crack cocaine and a full-blown alcoholic. I was to remain in that for the next 20 years. And in between, I went to jail numerous times, but I also went to prison on 3 occasions for drug sales, drug possession, and burglary. Those are separate ones. Those are the ones they caught me for. There's a lot of things that I'm not proud of, but it has nothing to do with pride. These are the things I did on the streets, and I don't do them today. I'm not that person whatsoever. So, with my Ivy League education, I spent years behind bars, which was probably the right place for me to be. And I got out with all I had was me and the memories and who I was, but I was willing to change. And I undertook certain things to make a change mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically to be the person I am today.
Yeah. And I guess that's where the book title comes in, Becoming
Mhm.
Ken,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So what was so you spent three different occasions
Mhm.
incarcerated. What
Mhm.
what was the time? in between each of those convictions, so to speak? Like how
Streets,
quickly?
streets. So, yeah, so you say how quickly?
Yeah.
My apologies for interrupting, but let's talk about that. First time I went to prison, I well, my first felony. Talk about felony. I don't talk about misdemeanors. There's too many. It means you're doing less than a year and incarcerated. Anything over a year, 1 day is a felony. So I'm in jail numerous times, but then I get arrested for my first felony, which was burglary, 1991, home burglary. And I went to jail and then I was sentenced, which is very rare for a Class A felony in the state of Washington, to 5 years, no, excuse me, 2 years of intensive probation. Very rare. Like only 5% of the people get that. But they saw my Ivy League degree and I present well when I clean up. And so they gave me a shot. And I stayed sober for about 2 years. Then I went back into my addiction. And within a few more years, I picked up my second felony, which was possession of a controlled substance, crack cocaine. And then I picked up, and I went to prison on that one twice. And then, because you go to prison, I go out on probation. I violate my probation. I go back into prison to finish up the sentence, get out, and probably a year later, maybe 2 years later, I went in for drug sales, which was a 6 year sentence, of which I did three.
So how old were you at that time during the third sentence?
2004, so I was 42 years old.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
So how long after you got out of that third sentence did you realize that you were quite blessed at this point to probably A, still be alive with the crack cocaine addiction, and B, continue to get a lot of, second, third chances that you decided it was time to become Ken?
So I tell the story in the book, and it actually began the day I was arrested, September 22nd, 2004. I was arrested. At that time, all I owned was a pair of sneakers, no socks, pair of shorts, no underwear, and a t-shirt. That was the sole possessions that I possessed as a grown 42-year-old man. That's it. I went out to sell a $10 rock of crack cocaine so I had money to go to treatment. I had to take a bus from Reno, Nevada to Seattle, Washington. I get arrested for sales to undercover. And as I am hemmed up waiting for the paddy wagon, I am tears are pouring out of my eyes and I'm smiling. And the cop was worried. And he's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong? Why are you crying?" And I told him I am crying because I'm going to live. I can do prison. I've been there twice before. I can't do drug addict Ken Miller on the streets. I can't do that. I'm suicidal. I remember a counselor once told me in Seattle, Washington, he said, "Mr. Miller, you have cocaine psychosis. You will either kill someone or someone's going to kill you, okay, on the streets." And it's true. I believe it. Okay. So I'm hemmed up. That was my first glimmer of hope because I can do, they provide me a place to sleep. They provide me food. They have a weight pile. Now, what do you do with that environment is very important. And I knew I was going in. I thought I'd go in for a year or two. $10 rock. Give me a break. 6 years later, 6 year sentence later.
Wow.
That's number one. And then number two, which is real important, is the pivot moment, is when I was sitting on the bunk about a month and a half, going to court, getting ready to be sentenced to prison. And I had a conversation with God, or God had a conversation with me, and I listened. And he said, pretty much, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be painless, but I will be there with you. And you can do this. And I believed that ever since. And that was 20 years ago.
Wow. You've been clean and sober ever since.
Ever since, 100%. I'll look any man in the eye and tell him that because it's true. I have
Yeah.
no reason to, term we use on the street, fake the funk. I have no
Yeah.
reason. Yeah.
I love it. And have become quite successful.
Hmm.
Um, so, tell me about, you know, where you are today. What are you doing today outside of, your speaking and writing? I know you're working on some additional books other than the
Mhm,
one that
mhm.
just came out, but what else is Ken doing with his time here in this you know second version or third version or fourth version of Ken, whichever it might be?
Same four things I worked on in the penitentiary. So this is how it works. And this is my transformation to being and becoming Ken. I walked into prison third time. Same prison. You always got to go through what they call classification. And then you get moved out to a different prison. But I went in the same one. People remembered me. Like, oh, you're back. But that's very common in prison. You're back.
Yeah,
Okay, so I
unfortunately.
go in. Yeah, unfortunately. So I go in and I said to myself going into prison, I said, if I am the same person coming out that I am going in, I'm going to have the same results I had the first two times. Same results. I have to change me. I have to change me physically. I have to change me intellectually. I have to change me emotionally. And I have to change me spiritually. And the state of Nevada allowed me the opportunity to have a place to do that. But you still have to avail yourself of the resources. Quick story. I go to a counselor to work on the emotional because I had a lot of shame-based behavior that was eating me up. They were secrets that I wouldn't tell people. And I remember sitting down with the lady who's the counselor, and I said, well, how many guys do you work with? And she's not really wanting to tell me this because she's a civilian. I'm an inmate. And she thought about it. She said, two, 1,100 men on that yards. It's free counseling.
Wow.
1,100. I would go to anonymous program meeting, AA and NA, and I would be the only person, and there'd be a civilian in the meeting. 1,100 men. But I was there. And there would sometimes there'd be two guys, five guys, eight guys. But I was there Saturday morning at the anonymous program meetings. So, again, it's what you avail yourself. Everybody else had that opportunity, so unless you
Right.
were the whole. So so what I do now, I do the same thing. I work out, physical. I read constantly. I read a lot. Okay. In the last 20 years, I just finished my 1,000th book because I track every book I read. Oh, probably up to about 1,050 books that I've read since 2004. Okay. And then I do the emotional. And then what I do predominantly there, this is what I do for emotional. I do have mentors, but I give back. That makes me feel better about who I am and helps me work on the emotion. But this is another thing, Dan, and I'll say this, and I have no problem saying this. It's all right to be well. It's all right to be well. I'm well. You can talk to people who know me, people who deal with me, people who interact with me. I don't always have to have a problem. I don't always have to be unwell. I don't always have to have something I'm working on. And because once I'm working on me, I'm not giving out. And now I'm doing much more giving out. I mentor men all over this country. I have a Black men's book club that I started. I volunteer. I teach. I give back. I give back. And then I have church in the spiritual realm.
Yeah,
And I
I love it.
pray and I meditate.
I love it. You'd mentioned in there that you do have some mentors.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Tell me how important that is in your journey to have mentors there for you and with you.
It's more important that I mentor than having mentors. And I don't want to make this up. Early on, it was important because I needed validation or I needed co-signing on good behavior. Because a lot of times we have the right idea in our head, but we're not sure. Hey, let me put the scenario, let me put the experience, let me put the details. What is your thoughts on my next step? This is what I'm thinking of doing next. And individuals that care about me, Alphonse Brown and Jim Posey, who those are two of my mentors, and they've been my mentor for 15 years. That is important, but almost more importantly is what I learned from my mentees and how I become a better mentor. And I get more satisfaction. And Dan, I don't want this to come across wrong. I do life well. I do life well. And what I mean, I have very, very little pain in my life. And I have very, very little, if not at all, fear. I was fear-based on the streets. I was fear-based in penitentiary. I was fear-based when I got out of the penitentiary. Fear. I don't, I have no resentment. Zero. I resent no human being in this world. I'm not a big fan of maybe the Minnesota Vikings, but I don't resent them. Okay. I'm a Seahawks fan, so and I'm a UW fan, the University of Washington Huskies. But I don't, you see what I'm saying? I don't have any resentments. I've worked through all that,
Yeah.
and it's work, but I've worked through all that. So I don't spend a lot of time working on Ken. Ken's fine. I became Ken. Ken is a kind and gentle man. That's who I am. Now, how do I give back? When do I give back? Who do I give back to? That is important to me. And that's where I spend more of my time.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things I want to pack there. So,
Mm-hmm.
you talked about you really spend more time mentoring than using your mentors
Oh,
now.
yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
when you did need those mentors in a greater influence on your life, is that what led you to become wanting to be in their shoes, wanting to help others then because of the way they helped you when you were, at your, I don't know if you'd say at your lowest or during that growth period. Is that part of what led you to wanting to be a mentor yourself and give
Yes,
back?
yes, and no. So I had the mentor, a gentleman named Jim Posey, who's my first mentor, or the mentor, at least this time, because I had one back in the 80s. Okay? Didn't listen, but I had one. And so what I was seeking was an older black male that I could take direction and or support emotionally. That's a big part of the mentoring. So anyway, I met him and we built a relationship. And then on a fluke, I had to make a speech. And at the end of the speech, I told everybody in the audience that I was going to reach out to this young man who walked across the stage and mentor him. And that's how I got my first, and I still to this day, 15 years later, meet with him quarterly and
Wow.
mentor him, among others. Okay.
Wow. So you'd mentioned that you learn from your mentees as well.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about some of the, and that's something I can relate to, again, a little different, but a little the same as, coming from a sports coaching background. I'd always talk about how I learned just as much from my players as what I was teaching them throughout my coaching career. So, you know, talk a little bit about what you're learning um, as a mentor from your mentees. What are some of those things that you've learned over the years? And why is it important to go into a mentoring relationship knowing that there is some learning on your part as well, that it's a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street.
Well, that's probably the first thing I learned. It's a two-way street. Because when I first went into mentoring, I thought it was going to be being on the pedestal, pontificating to this young man who's looking up to me because he's looking to me. Because that's one of the first things I explained. I'm the mentor, you're the mentee. Okay. But we put that, I have what is called explicit mentoring. And honestly, I'm going to write a book about mentoring. That's another one of my books that are coming out probably this year. But in that, we established the relationship. And what I learned, I've always believed this, and especially once I started doing it, the best way to learn is to teach. The best way to learn is to teach. And one of the things I had to learn as a mentor was how to listen better. I'm used to talking. Even when you're asking questions, I don't know if you see, I cock my head and I'm listening. We call it active listening, but I'm listening. What is he saying? What is probably the motive behind what he is saying? And then what is a learned or pragmatic answer to his question? But I'm listening. Okay, I'm not thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to say because I need to find the question first. So anyway, I'm working with the guy. And then one of the greatest gifts I've learned from mentoring, there's so many, is that individuals are on a different path or a different level on their journey. Okay. And I have to meet them where they're at. When I first started mentoring, when I first started teaching, when I first started managing and being a leader, because I'm all of the above, I thought everybody thought like me. I hate to say that, but I thought I'm talking about in the business world, corporate world.
Right.
I have a very specific way of thinking. And there's other people that think like me. Okay, I'm discreet, analytical. I'm a spreadsheet guy, bullet points. That's not how everybody thinks. I
Mhm.
didn't know that. And so sometimes there's friction because they're more of arts, they're more of feelings, they're more of relationships. Okay. So learning to find out where that individual is, and I do that by questions and by listening, and then meeting them. And then I learned how to engender trust. So important. And I say that a lot of stuff, I'm very explicit. And I will just say, I'll give you an example. Every man I've ever mentored, and I've mentored upwards of 50, 60 men. Actively, I'm doing 10 right now. Last year, I was doing 29 at one time. I had to cut it back. But every single man I've ever worked with, the first thing that after we do the introduction, once we decide that we want to be in a mentor-mentee relationship, I ask them one question.
What's
What
that?
is your dream? What is your dream?
Mm.
And then I say, I give you permission to dream. And then I shut up. And I've had guys sit there for 5 minutes coming up with their dream because sometimes they had a dream, but somebody has took it out of them. A parent, a sibling, a coworker, a colleague, a road dog, whatever we want to call it. You can't have that dream. You're not smart enough. You're not good looking enough. You're not talented enough. How dare you have that dream? And I tell them that's my job. I'm here to engender dreams. And then the other thing, I would talk to them, you don't know me, because most of the time they don't know me, but I will build trust to you, which is a belief in a perceived future action. That's what trust is.
Yeah.
And we go from there. I mean, there's a lot more, but we go from there.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that, um, trust, respect, those are all earned earned things. Like you can go in and because you're the mentor, they're the mentee, because I was the coach and a player was a player, that you think that's automatic, that they're going to respect you, they're going to look up to you. And no, you have to earn that. I mean, they'll go into it initially, but if you do things over and over where you're not continuing to gain that trust and respect, you're going to lose it. So you know, I think it's important to recognize that as leaders, that the title, the uh, the position you're in a company or something else, gives you a certain leeway to start, but you have to do stuff to continue to earn that over time. I think that's so important, and one of the things that, you know, as a society we lose sight of. People think that, hey, if this is just this person's title, then like they've got it made. They don't have to do anything from there, and that's so far from the truth.
So my next book is on respect and disrespect. I've seen more people hurt, killed, or damaged due to that word, one word, because people think it's drugs, women, and money. It's not. Those are just manifestations of your disrespect to me.
Right.
Okay. And these are the repercussions or ramifications of that disrespect. Respect, what does it mean? Respect is an acknowledgement of a person's position or stature within a community. Within it, so you have a community in the sports world. Coach, this is the community. Do you acknowledge my position or stature within that community to support? So, and there's something, it's not even a pushback, but I just want to give you a little different interpretation. In some cultures, you automatically respect elders. My wife's Alaska Native. In the Alaska Native community, you're brought up to respect elders. Why? Because they've lived that long and have this compendium of knowledge, whether it's hunting, whether it's weaving, whether it's cooking, whatever it may be, but you respect that because they've earned that by living this long and producing for the group, the tribe, the village.
Right.
Okay. And we've gotten away from that. I mean, we have in the Black community, we have usually mad respect for grandmothers, the older matriarchs of the family. Because a lot of times, as Black men, we're knuckleheads and we're in prison, dead, or left the family. But the foundation is this older Black female matriarchs. And you can do a lot of things to a lot of people, but you would never go in there and go mad disrespect. I know killers that wouldn't do that to their grandmother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just saying it's sometimes it's built in. Is it earned? Or is it given respect? But what we're predominantly talking about and what I work with is trust and respect. And what I say is it'll be earned over time because I have what is called integrity. And my
Yeah.
integrity says what comes out of my mouth is my action. And if it isn't, then I'm going to let you know for this reason I couldn't make the meeting. Okay, or I'm going to be running a little late, But if I say I'm going to do something, a perceived future action. Okay.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I want to shift gears a little bit here,
Okay, sure.
Ken, but have you ever met your birth mother or your birth father?
Sure. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So I was very, very fortunate in that I did the DNA. And when I did the DNA, I got back the results. And the results said that my mother was this woman named Joanne Horn, lived in Bloomingburg, New York. And I looked at that and my eyes got really big because I had moved from Bloomingburg, New York 25 years before.
Wow.
Okay. So let me just do this quick one. So I call her up and I'm telling you, I had fear. She's a grown man. I had fear because I was afraid that she wouldn't want to have contact with me because she'd give me up for adoption 60 years, but 55 years before. She took my call and I said, can we talk about my dad? She said, no, I'll do that in person. I said, cool. And so I flew over there like a month later. And we sat down and I showed her pictures of me as a child. And she looked at the pictures and she said, I met you. What do you mean you met me?
Wow.
She had come up to visit her brother who lived in Bloomingburg. This was before she lived in Queens. And there's only one Catholic church. There's only one Black family in the Catholic church. After church or during the week, she went over to Elizabeth Potts's house where I was being babysat till my mom could come pick me up. And she remembers meeting me. And I never mentioned Elizabeth. I just called her Aunt Betty. I never mentioned Elizabeth Potts. I
Right.
met you at Elizabeth Potts's house. She had seen her child that she didn't know, 7 years old, 8 years old. Incredible. Again, it's in
Wow.
the book. It's just, how does that kind of stuff happen?
Yeah.
And so I did meet her, and she, unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years later, but we built a relationship, and she was so happy to have me because she had been wondering all these years. My
Right.
father passed away in the 70s. Again, he was in that world. And so he passed away. And so, but I went down to Mississippi, not Mississippi, Georgia. We're down to Georgia. We're Fort Benning, wherever Fort Benning is.
Okay. Yeah, it's in Georgia.
Yeah, what city is that?
I'm not sure. My brother did basic training there though, so that's
Yeah.
that's why I
Well,
know
Fort
that
Benning.
Fort Benning's in Georgia. So,
Yeah, I went down there. That's where the family, I went and saw the house that he grew up in and met some relatives down there, and which is wonderful. So I've done all that. So I didn't get a chance to meet him, but he blessed me with two wonderful sisters. He impregnated two more white teenage girls.
wow.
One in 52, one in 65, and one in 60 in I was 62, 65, and 52. And those are my half sisters. And we are to this day friends.
That's very cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
very cool.
And the your adoptive parents,
Mhm.
um, you know, what you talked about your dad and your mom were pretty much polar opposites from the short little bit that you talked about as far as one was addicted alcoholic and so talk a little bit about how those roles um, played in your development as as who you are today.
My mother was Irene Miller, was probably the finest human being I've ever met. I've met a lot of them over the years, and a lot of us say that about our moms. Okay, I got you, I got you. Okay, and that's cool. That's my belief. So you have this beautiful, spiritual, extremely talented Black woman that grew up in the 40s, 50s, 60s. You have my father, this is my adoptive Sam, whose background is World War II, grew up, in the 30s, poor, then went off to fought in Italy, North Africa, came back and dealt with the difficulties of being a Black man in the 50s and 60s without a college degree or anything, which is the normal. My father, and I always say this is one of the worst types of alcoholics. What I mean by types is what is the mental drive. My father was a self-pitying alcoholic, and he felt sorry for him. He had a wife that out-earned him. He had this beautiful gift. And so when I was adopted, because my mom didn't have any children, he had already had two kids from his former marriage. So all I did was pull away love from his wife. And so that was a lot of his anger toward me. And so my mom finally divorced him in 1980. 5 years later, 5 years after she divorced him, he went to her job and shot her 6 times,
Oh,
and then
wow.
came to my job to try to shoot me, or was going to, but the gun jammed. So he does 8 years. Remember, I've forgiven him. I've talked to him. I mean, before he passed away, talked to him. My mom lived, still had two bullets in her 40 years later when she finally passed away, but she lived. And so I had this gentleness there. This is the crazy part of it, Dan, and you asked a great question, is this. The last thing I wanted to be was an alcoholic. The last thing. I grew up with that. I know what that was. Within 1 month of my first drink, I was a full-blown alcoholic. It had nothing to do, I'm in Dartmouth. It had nothing to do with my dad beat me as a kid or I was a foster child. It
Right.
had to do with the way I metabolized alcohol. Okay.
Right.
And then, some of us become addicts, some of us don't. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And this has been a great conversation, but
Hmm.
got to start wrapping things up. Is there anything that we missed that you think would be important to the listeners you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Anything like, yeah, I'll just talk about one thing. The gift of forgiveness. Until I learned to forgive, and I'm going to talk about two aspects, well, really three aspects. You forgive others, you forgive self, and you forgive God. And to forgive God is a more difficult one. It's like, how can, what, first of all, I thought I was a God, okay? That's what I call pride, a God unto thyself. Okay. That means I'm going to make the rules and I'm going to live by these. And I'm in antithesis or in opposition to God and God's will. And for many years, I was angry at God. That's that self-pity. It's his fault. It's his fault. It's his fault. That's why all this bad stuff's happening, not me. I didn't take acceptance. It's my fate. Okay. Then there's forgiveness of others. And I harbored so much anger toward my father, so much anger at individuals that had affected me. I've had my jaw broken twice. I've had my eye orbital broken. I've had my nose broken in fights. Okay. I've been beat up bad. Okay. I've been put in the hospital on more than one occasion. I have put people in the hospital. Okay. I'm not, again, apologizing. I'm just saying those are the facts. But I had to forgive those people. I've gone to kill people who have hurt me. And I had to get away from that thinking. And even years later, I harbored emotions that would come up whenever I thought about what these people had done to harm me or cause me discomfort or pain.
Yeah.
I've forgiven them, even my father. And then the last one, I had to forgive myself. I know I'm fallible. I understand everything I've done. I understand my why behind it, of course. And then I also acknowledge this is what I did. Okay. Those I could, I apologized to. There's some I can't legally apologize to, but I've apologized to everybody that quote unquote I could find, and I'm legally allowed to. I had victims. Okay. So those three, just the power of forgiveness, and then one more, just letting go of secrets, letting go of secrets.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So Ken, if anybody wants to reach out to you, find out more about the book, find out more about what you're doing today, where can they find you out on the internet?
Ken Miller Speaks. I'm a speaker. I speak from the stage. If you've heard something that you thought would be of interest for me to speak about, I speak about resilience. I speak about self-esteem. I talk about coaching, mentoring, and workplace sponsorship. Feel free. There's a couple other topics on there, but Ken Miller Speaks. And if my book is on Amazon, there's audio, there's ebook, there's hardcover, there's softcover, and it's called Becoming Ken. And those are available there. But the key thing is I just want to hopefully inspire someone to, if they need to get help or they need support. And thank you, Dan, because you have this platform. And thank you for allowing me to come on to the platform and having it for others. Some people, what I have said will resonate with you. Other people are like, hey, he's different, weird. I'm too bad what happened to him. I'll move on down the road. That's
Right.
fine. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Ken, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So what's one of the little things that Ken does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
I almost every day, I can't 100% say I do this every day. I thank people. I thank them. And what I mean by that is I literally will say, just like I just did with you. I mean, that is so ingrained in me. I thank people, and I want people to have this feeling. I see you. I see you.
Love
I
that.
acknowledge you by my listening. And then also, I honor you and your presence. And I thank you for allowing me just whatever portion to have interaction with you. I don't want anything. I'm not here to sell books. I'm not here to get on stages. I'm here because I believe that God has directed me to speak to people. Thank you.
I love that. Absolutely love that answer. Ken, it's a great conversation. Really appreciate it. For those out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While you're there, check out our Pay It Forward program. We can purchase a copy of one of our books, and Sandy and I will donate it somewhere along the line in our travels. Again, Ken, really appreciate you taking the time. It was a great conversation. Wish you nothing but the best moving forward. And if we get out there to the Washington area, we'll definitely look you up for sure.
I'm looking forward to it. Meals on me.
All right.
Thank you again.
Thank you.